Chapter 3 of Research Methodology, Measures of Central Tendency. My part will be statistical treatment, and the objectives at the end of the topic, you will be able to know the different statistical treatment that can be used in a research paper, compute mean, median, and mode for questionnaire validation, come up with correct statistical treatment for the research paper. Kumbaga sa flowchart of the research process, nasa 8 na tayo of data processing and statistical treatment. Statistical treatment, a mathematical treatment used for summarizing or analyzing numerical data or information. So when we already have the data, these are the statistical treatment that we will be using to summarize the data. So what are these? Measure of central tendency. In the first one, in a measure of central tendency, meron tayong mean. So this is the most common measure of central tendency. It is simply the sum of the numbers divided by the number of numbers. So these are the formula to get the mean. Now, para mas maintindihan pa natin, punta tayo sa example. May scores tayo ng 1, 2, 3, 6, and 8. I-add lang natin sila lahat. 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 6 plus 8 equals 20. And we will divide the 20 by 5. So, paano natin nakuha yung 5? Bakit i-divide natin yung 20 sa 5? Kasi, kung ilan yung element, number of element na dito, doon natin i-divide. So, bilangin natin 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So, 5 lahat. So, 20, divide natin sa 5. So, the answer will be 4. So, our mean is 4. Mas lalo natin maintindihan, magbibigay ulit ako ng isa pang example. So, we have 15, 13, 18, 16, 14, 17, and 12. So, to get the value, we will gonna add them. 15 plus 13 equals 28. 28 plus 18 equals 46. 46 plus 16 equals 62. 62 plus 14 equals 76. 76 plus 17 equals 93. And 93 plus 12 equals 105. So 105 divided by 7. Because they are all 7 elements. So, the answer will be 15. So, the mean is 15. So, let's move on to the letter B of measure of central tendency, which is the median. So, median is the middle value in the list of numbers. To find the median, your numbers have to be listed in numerical order from smallest to largest. So, the first example is the 14, 13, we have the samples of 14, 13, 21, 13, 13, 13, 14, 16, and 18. So before we find the middle value, we first gonna arrange them from smallest to largest. So 13, 13, 13, 13, 14, 14, 16, 18, and 21. Kung bibilangin natin sila, they are all 9 elements. Kung ganyan, madali na lang natin makikita yung middle value dahil meron na siyang specific center, which is the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the 14. So the answer will be simply 14. So, our median is 14. Dito, dahil meron siyang specific center, madali lang natin na makita or na identify yung middle value niya, which is 14. Now, to get further with that, I will give you another example. So, this is for the even number that is divisible by 2. So we will have 6 elements, which is 26, 16, 10, 30, 29, and 12. Dahil 6 siya, walang specific middle value. So, ang gagawin natin, kukunin lang natin yung parang nag-aagawan na middle value, which is the third and the fourth, the 10 and 13. So, what are we gonna do? We're gonna add them. This is the formula to get the median for the even number. 10 plus 30 divided by 2. 10 plus 30 equals 50. 50 divided by 2 equals 25. And our median is 25. So for the last one, the letter C of measure of central tendency is mode. Mode is the value that occurs most often. If no number in the list is repeated, then there is no mode for the list. So example, etong scores nito ay kinuha lang natin sa median. But we can also apply this for the mode. So 13, 13, 13, 13, 14, 14, 16, 18, and 21. So kung ano lang pinaka maraming numbers na repeated numbers, yun yung magiging mode. So, meron tayong 4 na 13 at 2 14. Kung ano mas marami, yun yung ating mode. So 13 ang pinakamarami. So the answer would be simply 13. So the mode is the most simple one because we don't need to calculate it. So ganun lang kasimple, and that's all for the measure of central tendency.
Standard deviation. Standard deviation is the measure of deviation of a set of data from its mean. It measures absolute variability of distribution is the higher its deviation or variability, the greater standard deviation, and greater will be the magnitude of the deviation of the value from there. Insensitive to apply a single can erase and turn on and distort in feature of the spread. 5. For data with almost the same mean, the greater spread and the greatest standard deviation. Number 6. Standard deviation can be used conjunction with the mean in order to calculate data intervals when analysis normal distribute data. Pag nakita tayo ng graph ng ganito, standard deviation, anong ibig sabihin ng unang image? Ibig sabihin, ito yung mean na deviation, ibig sabihin, kung mga data dito malayo sa mean. Malayo sa mean ng even. Ito naman na nasa baba, ibig sabihin, malapit siya sa mean sa standard ng deviation.
Ay mga kamag-aral, ang topic natin ngayon is about the F-test and T-test. P-value is the probability of the getting result as extreme as observed values under null hypothesis. For practical purpose, accept alternative hypothesis if the p-value is less than 5% alpha. Accept null hypothesis if the p-value is more than 5% alpha. For example, a study comparison of cells of 2020 and 2021. Alternative hypothesis, there is significant difference in cells of 2020 and 2021. Ang null hypothesis, ang ibig sabihin ng null ay wala. There is no significant difference in cells of 2020 and 2021 if alpha is 5%. And you got a p-value less than 3%. Accept siya. Accept ng alternative hypothesis. But if you got p-value more than 45%, then accept a null hypothesis. Papunta naman tayo sa t-test. This used to find out if the means between the two population is significantly different. Ang subject dito ay yung respondents. Itong 1, 2, 3 hanggang sa 11, kung mapapansin nyo, ay iisa lamang yan na grupo. Ang score 1 at score 2, for example, bibigyan tayo ng example about the bar exam. Bago sila aatin ng bar exam, magkakaroon muna ng free test. Ito yung score 1. At ang score 2 ay siya yung conduct to post-host test. Okay? Naintindihan ba? F-test is used to find out if the variance between the two populations are significantly different. Ito naman yung dalawang grupo. Dalawang grupo ito na respondents din sa characteristic. Analysis of variance, ito naman yung ANOVA, more than 2 categories. Okay? Thank you po.
Good day, I'm Trish Tuda and I'm about to explain to you the purpose of using analysis of variance or ANOVA and its three types. You might use analysis of variance or ANOVA as a marker. You would use ANOVA to help you understand how your different groups respond with a null hypothesis for the test that the means of different groups are equal. We have 3 known types of ANOVA test. First is the one-way ANOVA, which refers to the number of independent variables, not the number of categories in each variable. To carry out the one-way ANOVA, you should necessarily have only one independent variable with at least 2 levels. Halos wala rin siyang pagkakaiba sa test. For example, difference in IQ can be assessed by country, and country can have 20 or more different countries in that variable. Second, two-way ANOVA. Two-way ANOVA is carried out when you have 2 independent variables. It is an extension of one-way ANOVA. You can use the two-way ANOVA. You can use the two-way ANOVA test when your experiment has a quantitative outcome and there are 2 independent variables. Two-way ANOVAs can be used to examine the interaction between the 2 independent variables. For example, females may have higher IQ overall compared to males, and they are much greater in European countries compared to North American countries. Two-way ANOVA are also called factorial ANOVA. Factorial ANOVA uses more than one category as independent variable. Ginagamit din ang two-way ANOVA sa mga research na gumagamit ng factorial designs. Factorial ANOVAs can be balanced or unbalanced. Third is n-way ANOVA or MANOVA. It is used when we have multiple or more than 2 independent variables. The main purpose of using ANOVA test is to find out the effect on dependent or response variables against a change in the dependent variable. Test is chi-square. This is a test of statistical significance that is used when research data are in form of frequency count for 2 or more categories. Binibilang niya yung nag-react sa category na nandun.
Chapter 4: Presentation, Analysis, and Interpretation of Data. At the end of the topic, you will be able to understand the difference between presentation, analysis, and interpretation in Chapter 4 of a research paper. Effectively present the gathered data through graphs, tables, and figures. Presentation is the process of organizing data into logical, sequential, and meaningful categories and classifications to make them amenable to study and interpretation. Data analysis is a process of transforming a data to discover useful information and to form conclusions. We use statistical treatment in this process. So to be able to analyze data, we use some statistical processes like central tendency, and also we can use percentage. So in this part, we use the statistical treatment. And finally, we have the interpretation. In data interpretation, it is the process of making sense out of a collection of data that has been processed. So so we have we have this data that we collected. So what do the result of the study mean? This part is perhaps the most critical aspect of the research report. This will constitute overall conclusions of your study. So your study will rely on the interpretation of data gathered. Data may be presented in three methods. It could be textual, it could be tabular, and lastly, it could be graphical. So the first one is textual presentation. In textual presentation, the data gathered are presented in paragraph form. Also the data written in red. It is combination of text and numbers. So let's move on to the tabular presentation. In tabular presentation, method of presenting data using the statistical table. It is a systematic organization of data in columns and rows. So the third one is the graphical presentation. It is a chart presenting data in pictorial or diagrammatic form. So we have different types of graphs and charts. We have bar graphs, linear graphs, pie graphs, pictograms, statistical maps, and ratio charts.
General guidelines in reporting and writing data analysis and interpretations. Number one is the introductory is the first paragraph of your essay. Dito nakakakuha ng interes ang iyong mga mambabasa. Number two is kailangan ang paggawa ng subtitles of sections ay nakabatay sa mga tanong sa mga pahayag na suliranin and usually to make a statement. And sometimes you can ask questions or you can give and express emotions. So, number three, tables and figure, number and titles ay dapat nakasulat sa capital, lowercase, at the center. Dapat ay nakaformat with the longest line first followed by the progressively shorter lines. Number 4, ang table and figure ay hindi dapat pagkakasunod-sunod, hindi dapat magkakasunod-sunod ng mga numero. Dapat muna ito ipacheck bago ito talakayin or i-discuss. Number 5 is, ang pag-discuss dapat ay nakasunod sa format na APA style or MLA. Here are some keywords of common phrase used in analyzing and interpreting data. Examples: data blank presents the, and table blank indicates the, as could be as. Reflected in the table there was, as observed there was indeed, delving deeper into the figures. The illustrative graphs above below shows that, and or in explaining the results, it can be stated that there are some of examples in common phrase used in analyzing and interpreting data. Table 1. Presentations, analysis, and interpretation data. Shows that the frequency distributions of the respondents' gender, it illustrates that there are more female respondents, which are 82 or 75.23%, than male. Male, which are 27 or 24.77%. Note: the interpretations of the data should always be written below the table with the same label as the table title. The interpretations is always below the table that should not always go above the table. Next is the interpretations in the table should not be written on a separate sheet. As much as possible, write or type them in the same sheet of paper so that the reader can understand the table.
Summary of findings. Summary of findings is the last part of the thesis or dissertation. It is where the findings or the result of the thesis study is written. Summary of findings should be a short statement such as the main purpose of the study, the population or respondents period of the study, method of research, instruments, and sampling. Summary of findings. First, general guidelines in writing the summary of findings. Second, subtitles of the summary of findings should follow the statements of the problem. Only average or means and final value should be mentioned. Third, there should be a brief statement about the main purpose of the study, the population or respondents, the period of the study, method of research use, the research instrument, and the sampling design. Fourth, the findings may be lumped up together, but clarity demands that each specific question under the statement of the problem must be written first, to be followed by the findings that would answer it. The specific question should follow the order they are given under the statement of the problem. And lastly, the finding should be textual generalization, that is a summary of the important data consisting of text and numbers. Every statement of fact should consist of words, numbers, or statistical measures woven into a meaningful statement. No deduction, nor inference, nor interpretation should be made, otherwise it will only be duplicate in the conclusion. Summary of findings is nagpapakita ng pangunahing impormasyon tungkol sa pinakamahalagang resulta ng inyong paper. Conclusion is the intended to help the reader understand why your research should be matter to them after they have finished reading the paper. Guidelines in writing the conclusion. First, conclusion should be logically written, presenting the valid overtones of the findings. Conclusion should have inference, deductions, abstractions, implication, interpretation, general statements, and generalization based on the findings. Second, conclusion should appropriately answer the specific question raised at the beginning of the investigation, in the order they are given the statements of the problem. Third, conclusion should point out what were factually learned from the inquiry. However, no conclusions should be drawn from the implied or indirect effects of the findings. Fourth, conclusion should be formulated concisely, that is, brief and short yet the study as required by specific questions. Fifth, without any strong evidence to the contrary, conclusion should be started categorically. They should be worded as if they are 100% true and correct. They should not give any hint that the researcher has come doubts about their validity and reliability. The use of quantifiers such as probably, perhaps, maybe, and like should be avoided. 6. Conclusion should refer only to the population, area, or subject of the study. And lastly, conclusion should not be repetitions of any statement anywhere in the research paper. They may be recapitulations if necessary, but they should be worded differently, and they should be conveyed the same information as the statement recapitulated. So here in conclusion is para maintindihan or mas maunawaan ng mga reader ang iyong natapos na research paper.
My name is Norylyn Varona, and I will discuss about the guidelines in writing the recommendation. Number 1 is no recommendation should be made for a problem or anything for that matter. that has not been discovered or napag-uusapan in the study. Recommendation for things not discussed in the study are irrelevant. So, the major aim of this study, of this part of our research paper, is to help solve a problem that you found out in your study. So that's why no recommendation should be made for a problem, because the major aim of this part of our research is to help solve a problem that you found out in your study. Next is number 2. There may also recommendation for the continuance of a good practice or system, or even recommendation for its improvement. This is to ensure a continuous benefit being accorded to the universe involved. Aside from suggesting something for improvement or suggesting something to solve a problem, also don't forget na we can also include here in the part of our research paper is the recommendation for the continuance of a good project, of a good policy or good program. Next is number 3. Recommendations should aim for the ideas, but they must be feasible, practical, and attainable. It is useless to recommend the impossible. So make it a point na yung ilalagay mo sa recommendation is feasible, practical, and attainable. Don't put anything that is not possible. Doon lang tayo sa may makatotohanan. Number 4 is recommendation should be logical and valid. Okay? Next is recommendation should be addressed to the person, entities, agencies, or offices who or which are in a position to implement them. So here, you should address the concern, the person, agency, office that in position to implement the action you are recommending. When we say person, in general term yan. Like, student ba siya, yung i-address mo, or business owners, or the general manager of the company. You should specify that. Kapag naman entities, agencies, DepEdVA, DOH, DPWH, and etc. Next is, there should be a recommendation for further research on the same topic in other place to verify or negate the findings of the study. This is necessary so that if the findings are the same, generalization of wider application can be formulated. And now let's proceed on presenting the written research report. So the final report is the document that ultimately represent the research. The report is the record of the research content, process, and analysis as reported by the researcher make about what is known about this world, social world. It can also act as a catalyst for further research. So here's the following consideration in presenting in the written research report according to Kirby.